Chapter 34. Chicken. What difference a day and a return mummy make? The trio's reception home wasn't at all what they'd expected. Rather than being grounded for life, as they predicted, Yoji, Cass, and Max Ernest were greeted like returning war heroes. It seemed everybody, meaning mostly their parents, accepted their story about being kidnapped at gunpoint by a vigilante magician known as Lord Pharaoh. If he was capable of stealing the mummy, all agreed, why won't he wrap 3 kids in linen bandages, throw them into a sarcophagus, and ship them to Las Vegas with only a cat food to sustain them? You will notice that our creative young runaways threw a few reality-based elements into their rather heavily embroidered story. As per his current whereabouts, Lord Pharaoh was believed to have fled north to Canada under the protection of a ruthless gang of bikers with ties to the Egyptian mafia. The elder Las Vegas entertainer was now the subject of a nationwide police manhunt. Most surprising of all was the greeting they received at school. When they arrived Friday morning, after having missed 2 days of school, a smiling Miss Johnson stood in front of the school gates under a giant banner painted to look like a movie poster. Return of the Mummy, the Defeat of Lord Pharaoh, starring Cass, Max Ernest, and Yoji. As was clear from the paint all over his clothes, if not for the grin on his face, Daniel had created the banner. And not a bad job. He had done it too. Perhaps in the future comic book illustrating would be his thing. Even Blob gave them a thumbs up. With cameras flashing, Miss Johnson welcomed them back, telling them that they were heroes and a credit to their instituting of higher or middle school learning. Now, a skeptic might say that this was the presence of the journalist that had turned Miss Johnson into such a warm and sunny principal. Like most people in her profession, Miss Johnson was very sensitive to her way of her school, and the portrayal in the media. However, in her defense, after the cameras had left and there were no longer any witnesses, Miss Johnson did not suddenly turn back to her old sourpuss self. On the contrary, she had told her surprised students that she had a special private congratulatory present for the 3 of them to share. It hadn't felt right since you'd returned it. I just don't think it belonged to me anymore, said Miss Johnson, taking the familiar Aztec artifact out of her purse. Would you like to keep and be responsible for this? The boys looked at Cass, and Miss Johnson handed her the tuning fork. As official mummy rescuing heroes, Cass and Max Ernest were allowed to go where they wished on the Saturday afternoon without having to employ the least bit of subterfuge. They merely told their parents that they were getting together for a walk. True, Cass' mother did volunteer something about not wanting her daughter to be kidnapped again, but Cass pointed out that if she could escape one mad magician, she could escape from anyone. Besides, she couldn't live her whole life in fear of not being nabbed or taken, or rather shut up in a box and mailed to Las Vegas, could she? And true, Max Ernest, who was once again the very apple of his parents' eyes, very separate eyes, had promised both his mother and his father individually that he would spend the next Saturday afternoon with them. But he managed to get out of the house without even his baby brother crawling after him. The walk was not quite as cheery as it sounded, however. Cass at least had remained rather sullen most of the way to the circus. Occasionally her ears might flare red, and it looked as though she might be about to say something, but Max Ernest hardly noticed. As was often the case, he was speaking enough for the 2 of them. Or what about starting with a joke that goes something like this? Sorry, I was going to bring my graduation speech today. Really, I swear. But my dog ate it this morning. Get it? It's a joke on the classic line, the dog ate my homework. Or the cat ate my homework. Or whatever, only it's a dog ate my graduation speech. Huh? Cass was paying little attention. So little, in fact, that she accidentally put a questioning inflection at the ear of her, huh? Which made Max Ernest explain himself, rather than continuing to babble on without bothering her too much with what he was saying, as she would have preferred. Do you like the joke? It's my favorite kind. The joke on a joke. I made it up on scratch. I didn't even read about it in a book. I'm writing all my own material now. All the best comedics do. Although even the best guy sometimes buys jokes. Did you know you could sell jokes to comedians for $50 each? How about that? Who knew that a single turn on a Vegas stage could do so much for one fledgling comedian's confidence? And yet there was no doubt that Max Ernst had new humorous spring in his step, a comedic twinkle in his eye that he never had before. He didn't even just look funny, he was possibly existed for the very first time that he might be funny. Cass, however, was immune to the charm of the new Max Ernst. She looked at him darkly. Don't talk to me about jokes. But the speech is due tomorrow. If I don't figure out a joke now, when will I? Cass' ears glowed red. Don't talk to me about jokes. Okay, said Max Ernst, then taken aback by the fierceness of her tone. I hate jokes. Okay? We won't talk about them then. Good. She walked ahead. You didn't use to hate them, said Max Ernst nervously, following behind her. I mean, you didn't like my jokes, but it was because you didn't think they were funny. Or because I didn't tell them right. Not because you hated jokes in general. That was before. Before what? Cass gave him a look. You mean with the mummy? Cass didn't say anything. That means yes. Max Ernst was not always very astute about the nonverbal cues. But this was a case Cass' meaning was clear. Earlier that day, Max Ernst had tried to press Cass for details about what transpired on stage between her and the mummy, but she wouldn't tell him anything. He knew she tried to put the ring on the mummy. He did see that much, but he didn't know whether she had learned the secret. It was quite strange, really. His memory of the moment was total blur. All he knew for certain was that Cass had been in a terrible mood ever since then. What does the mummy have to do with jokes? He asked. It's not the mummy himself. It was what he said. Max Ernst stared at his friend in surprise. He spoke to you? She nodded. In English? Uh-huh. Well, I think so. Wouldn't he speak in Egyptian? If he were going to speak, English wasn't even invented when he was alive. She hesitated. She hadn't necessarily meant to speak to Max Ernst about this, but now she was talking to him, and she had to admit it was a big relief. It was kind of like a dream, she said. I mean, I don't know if the mummy was really talking or if it was more like telepathy. Or maybe he was talking Egyptian and somehow he was going on. What he said got magically translated in my brain. Max Ernst looked dubious. On the purely skeptical bias, all those things are pretty unlikely. Well, something happened, and I heard him talk to me. Okay, let's say hypothetically that you heard him talk to you, said Max Ernst, humoring her. What does that have to do with jokes? Well, I guess you could say he told one. The mummy told you a joke? Max Ernst was incredulous. She nodded. So he didn't tell you what the you-know-what? No, well, yes, I mean, that was it. What it was. Max Ernst blinked in astonishment. This was possibly one of the few that he had never contemplated. The you-know-what was a joke. Cass nodded unhappily. A joke, or a joke as in a joke. That's so dumb as a joke. A joke? A joke. Cass nodded. A joke, you know. Max Ernst, the joke lover, was appalled. The you-know-what, the thing that nobody was supposed to know, the thing that we've done all those things for, the thing that you went back in time to find out. You're saying that the thing is a joke. I already know. Cass nodded. You know that you're joking, right? I wish I were. So what was the joke? You know I can't tell you. But you say I knew the joke already. Max Ernst protested. Just give me a hint, at least. Cass looked at him. What's the difference? She thought glumly. Think chicken. Chicken? As in scared? A chicken. A scared chicken. No, just a chicken. Max Ernst looked nonplussed. The joke about the chicken. The you know what is a joke about a chicken? Uh-huh. A story, joke, or riddle. Riddle. Mycerius thought for a second, trying to absorb the new and thoroughly distressing piece of information. Then his eyes widened. Is it a famous riddle? Cass nodded. Like a really famous? Cass nodded. Mycerius shook his head. Really, that's the you know what? Cass nodded. Yeah, that's it. Only substitute ibis for chicken. I can't believe it. I thought a lot of things, but nothing like that. It doesn't make any sense. I know. I don't believe it either. Well, so what's the answer? What do you mean? What's the answer? Which is it? Which is what? Cass asked, confused, totally confused. Which came first, the ibis or the egg? Cass put her head in her hands. Not that chicken joke. There was no time for her to clear up the matters, however. They had reached Pietro's trailer. Cass could see Yoji's bicycle parked next to one of the tents nearby. Inside she could hear Lily Wei shouting instructions. Kaya, Yoji responded. He had been practicing martial arts. It seemed almost sad, Cass thought, to hear the two of them working at it so seriously, now that she knew the secret was nothing more than, well, what it was. For the 100th time, Cass tried not to think about it. The secret was a joke. Did that mean that the Trace Society was? Pietro and everyone, the jester, the humologist, was she a joke too?